Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Commander deck techs. I'm releasing a new TMNT Commander deck every Thursday through mid-April when Secrets of Strixhaven drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. Hey, it's the Turtles, and we're gonna have fun with it. So if you have a request for a specific TMNT Commander you'd like to see me build, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is April, Reporter of the Weird, the Turtles' first human friend. She's usually depicted as a reporter, just like this. And even if you've only become familiar with the Ninja Turtles' extended cast of characters through this magic set, much like myself, one look at how wacky they are is enough to justify her epithet. I'm excited to show you what I put together for April, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I put it at the head of my deck. So I take 30 cards and put them toward whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands, so I can make sure I hit my land drops and I can cast my spells and play the game. Let's talk about our commander. April, Reporter of the Weird is a 2/2 legendary human detective for 2 and a blue. She only has one ability. Whenever she deals combat damage to a player, we draw that many cards and then we discard 1 card. Pretty simple. So if you're new to Magic, welcome. I'm going to go over the ideas this deck is built around, both in terms of the mechanics and the way it plays at the table. Then I'll go through each card individually and talk about how it works and why it helps our game plan. If you have questions, post them in the comments. My goal with this deck was to take an uncommon legend and build something inexpensive and fun for her. All the cards in this deck that are more than $1 or $2 USD at time of recording will play great in other decks if you want to disassemble this one once you're done with it. And if you want to drop the budget even further, the considering section at the bottom of today's Moxfield page will give you plenty of ways to do just that. Price aside, April's card is a great example of her personality. She has to be proactive if she wants to get a story, so she wades into the fray without hesitation. Once she can make it past the other combatants, she reaches her goal and digs up as much dirt as she can find. There's always some chaff among the facts, so she tosses her B-roll footage into the bin before trying to make sense of whatever mess she's uncovered. I like to think that if we have to discard to hand size at the end of turn because we've drawn too many cards, that's her editing her segments for time. So we have a mono-blue Voltron deck. We want to get April out by turn 3 and have her swinging in every turn thereafter. Each time she hits an opponent, she refills our hand and gives us options for her next foray onto the mean streets of NYC. It's our job to give her the tools she needs to do her job, mostly in the form of equipment, but with some enchantment support. April needs 3 things to succeed as the 4th estate. First, she needs to be evasive, so we have a number of ways to make her unblockable, to help her fly, or just to tap our opponent's creatures down so that she can leave the creature combat to her turtle friends. Second, she needs to be protected like one of her sources, so we have spells and equipment to keep her safe from removal, destruction, and any other forms of interference. Third, and most importantly, she needs to do as much damage as possible, so that we can draw even more cards each turn, so we have ways to modify her and pump up her power. We even have a few sources of double strike, so that we can draw twice as many cards in the same combat. After all, if it bleeds, it leads. Our curve is particularly low for a deck based around card draw, and that's because we spend our mana ruthlessly. Putting so many cards into our hand every turn means we always have something to cast, and we can take advantage of that with payoffs that reward us for drawing 2 or more cards in each turn, synergy pieces that care about how big our hand gets, and even a couple of ways to make extra land drops so that we can get our non-spells out of our hand and go even harder next turn. We also have a bit of an Artifacts Matter sub-theme and 35 artifact cards to support it. This plays fast and aggressively, our commander slipping past our foes' defenses to hammer them with questions and commander damage. She gets her answers in the form of more and more cards in our hand, and we use them to set her up for sharper investigations next turn. She's the press, so we press our advantage until our opponent's life totals and public images have both been through the ringer. They may doubt that our small uncommon commander can make a difference, but boy do we have a news flash for them as our headlines become their deadlines. We smile into the camera and speak truth to power, burying our opponents without burying the lead, and we get to watch their faces fall and their stocks drop under the impact of our hard-hitting journalism. You'll enjoy this deck if you like an aggressive play pattern that rewards you with enough cards that you never run out of things to do, or if you love a commander game that involves hitting the pavement, finding the through line, and coming out with a great story in the end. So as I mentioned earlier, this Mox field list that we're going over today, as usual, is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section full of cards that I thought about putting into this deck and ultimately decided against. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have a different idea for what you want to do with April, or if you like what I've done and want to enhance it in different ways, the considering section is a great place for you to start when you build your own April Reporter of the Weird deck. So we're going to start with our most important section, Voltron. Voltron, if you're new to Magic, means a strategy of commander deck built around the idea that we're putting a bunch of enhancements and modifications on one creature or on several creatures. Rather than going wide, we're going very, very tall. And in this deck, it's all about April herself. So we like to pump her up. We're going to start with this great one from Edge of Eternity's Atomic Microsizer. A single blue gets us an equipment that equips for 2 and gives the equipped creature +1/+0. And it says whenever the equipped creature attacks, we choose up to 1 target creature. That creature can't be blocked this turn and has base power and toughness 1/1 until end of turn. So we can choose our commander, and with this we usually do. Because our commander is a 2/2, her becoming a 1/1 is fine because she gets +1/+0. If that's accompanied by her being unblockable, we don't really care what her toughness is. It's not a concern for us, except for someone who's doing, direct damage to our commander with a spell like Lightning Bolt, which 2 mana or 2 toughness versus 1 toughness is not that different. But with the same power, since she becomes a 1/1 with +1/+0 and unblockable, this is a pretty sweet deal for a 1 mana equipment that equips for 2. We can, however, use this and make an opponent's creature unblockable and power toughness 1/1 until end of turn. Sometimes we want to do that. Sometimes we want to take a big creature that is a challenging blocker, or maybe it has lifelink or something, and we don't want them to gain life. And if we're attacking with multiple creatures, including April, maybe we want to sort of defang their defenses rather than give April unblockable because we have other ways to make her unblockable. So we've got good options. Usually we're choosing April with this trigger, but not always. Bloodforged Battle Axe, a classic, is next. A single generic mana gives us an equipment that equips for 2 and gives the equipped creature +2/+0. That's all. But whenever that equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, we make a token that's a copy of the Battle Axe. So we get another Battle Axe, meaning right after combat, if we want to, we can pay 2 to equip that one as well, and now our commander's getting +4/+0, +2/+0 from each Battle Axe. Then we do damage again the next turn, combat damage, and both of those will trigger and we'll end up with 4 Battle Axes, which doesn't just mean that we have ways of adding more and more power to our commander, it means more and more artifact tokens going onto the battlefield. What if we want to put those in some of our other creatures? We don't have that many of them, but we do have a bunch of ways to make token creatures, and some of our creatures can be threats on their own, especially if they've got a whole bunch of Battle Axes on them. So yeah, the Bloodforged Battle Axe is sort of like a way for us to get an equipment into play, and once we're doing damage, we don't have to draw any more equipment, we're just going to keep making more Battle Axes. But don't worry, we've got more equipment to draw. Like Mantle of Tides. This is a simple one, a single blue for an equipment that equips for 3 from Throne of Eldraine. But we don't ever have to pay this equip cost, because whenever we draw our second card each turn, we can attach this to a target creature we control. So the play pattern with Mantle of Tides is usually pay a blue to get it on the battlefield, and don't worry about equipping it this turn. Instead, swing in with April, do damage with April, draw cards with April, and that will trigger Mantle of Tides, and we can just equip it for the next turn. So in a way, this is like a slow equipment. It only costs 1, but it doesn't work the very turn it comes in unless we have a way of, drawing cards before combat. But at the very least, we're going to be able to have this next turn, and +1/+2 isn't nothing for a single mana. Speaking of which, we have Thinking Cap. This is a single generic mana for an equipment that equips for 3, but can equip a detective for 1. April is a human detective. And all this does is give the equipped creature +1/+2, but for a total of 2 mana, which we will definitely have by the time we get April into play, we can immediately make her a 3/4, which is a lot more threatening than a 2/2, and it, of course, builds up based on the other things we have, like Bloodforged Battle Axe or the Mantle of Tides. Adaptive Omni Tool is next. This is a card that it has a really powerful ability that in this deck just kind of isn't as important. This is a 2 generic mana equipment that equips for 3 and gives the equipped creature +1/+1 for each artifact we control. So that's including itself, but also all the token Bloodforged Battle Axes we're making, all these other cards that we're seeing right here on the screen. This is one of our cards that really makes April big. It also says whenever equipped creature attacks, so we don't even have to do damage to have this trigger. We look at the top 6 cards of our library and we can reveal an artifact from among them and put it in our hand and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this normally is great for a Voltron deck because it draws you an equipment off most of the time, or maybe a mana rock or something. In this deck, we don't always need this card draw. I mean, April's drawing us, with Adaptive Omni Tool on her, assuming we had nothing else on her. If she hits, she's going to draw us 3 cards and have us discard 1 anyway. So putting an extra artifact in our hand before that, it's not bad. It just feels less necessary. This is more in the deck for the pump effect, but still very nice to be able to get a little bit of extra card advantage on top of that, considering more than a third of our deck is artifacts. But Ether Tunnel's not. This is 1 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature and gives that creature +1/+1, rather, and can't be blocked. So auras are, an inherent 2 for 1. If someone removes April, that's us down 1 card, but our opponent is down a card. If someone removes April when she's enchanted with Ether Tunnel, then they've used 1 card to get rid of 2 of our cards. The trade-off with that is, unlike an equipment, we don't have to pay the equip cost to put the Ether Tunnel after we put it on the battlefield. So this is one of our best pieces and most inexpensive pieces for making our commander unblockable, which just goes to show why it's so important that we also have pieces that can protect her. So Ether Tunnel's a nice way to give a little bit of extra power, which does mean an extra card we're drawing every time she hits, and she will be hitting because she can't be blocked. Microsizer and Ether Tunnel together, sometimes because we have so many sources in this deck of unblockable, it feels like we're not getting more out of it than that, which, if you're wondering, that's why we're not running Trailblazer Boots, just because that's all it gives us. But Microsizer at least gives us the ability to pump up April if we're not using it for unblockable, and gives us that unblockable for an inexpensive price on its own. Ether Tunnel also gives us that extra bit of power, which is pretty good. Next up, from Final Fantasy, this is the Astrologian's Planisphere. I'm not a Final Fantasy person, so I don't know what's going on here. Let me know in the comments if this is something relevant in a thematic way to April. Maybe it is, who knows? Who is Diana? Good question. Anyway, this is 1 and a blue for an equipment that equips for 2, Diana, that has Job Select. Job Select means when this comes in, we make a 1/1 colorless hero creature token and then attach the Planisphere to it. So this comes in sort of as a creature for us. And it says equipped creature is a wizard in addition to its other types, and has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell and whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So interestingly, those counters go on the creature, not on the Planisphere. That's great. It means that if we play out the Planisphere and then don't immediately equip it to April, maybe we just want to pay the 2 mana and then swing in, April, in all likelihood, is going to be drawing us our 3rd card for the turn because she's going to hit. We've already drawn a card at the start of our turn, and we'll be drawing at least 2 more thanks to her 2 power. So that's us putting a counter on this hero token right away. In addition, whenever we cast non-creature spells, most of our spells are non-creature spells, so that's also putting counters on this token. Then, whenever we're ready, maybe that same turn, maybe the next turn, we can just pay 2 to move the Planisphere to April herself and get a way to pump up April, either once she does that damage for the turn, or by casting non-creature spells prior to combat and getting her even bigger, which makes us draw even more cards. So yeah, we can also pass this around if we want to pump up our team more so than April, but usually we just want to get this on April and make her get bigger and bigger and bigger. Next up is a classic. Originally from Dominaria 2018, this is Blackblade Reforged, a legendary equipment for 2 generic mana that equips for 7, but equips legendary creatures for just 3. So this is 5 total mana to get it onto the battlefield and equip to our commander, but it gives her +1/+1 for each land we control. So in this deck, it's pretty infrequent that we miss a land drop, so we're going to be able to get bigger and bigger and bigger as the game goes on. Like I mentioned in the heart of the deck, we also have a few ways to get lands into play beyond just making our land drops for the turn. We can sneak lands into play in this deck. So we can use that kind of as a combat trick with Blackblade Reforged. If we have an attack that's being made and maybe our opponent is not blocking because they think they could take the damage even if it takes them down to 1 or something, we throw out an extra land after blocks, thus pumping up April a little bit bigger, and now maybe that opponent's dead. A little bit magical Christmas land, but yeah, nice to be able to know the ways to use these pieces as they interact. Next up we have Eel Umbra. This is an Umbra armor card. Even though it's printed as totem armor, they recently changed that term. So this is 1 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature and gives that creature +1/+1. But it has flash, so we can use this at any time. Anytime we have priority, even on an opponent's turn, we can flash this in and make our commander a little bit bigger. Much the same way we could use that trick I mentioned a moment ago with Blackblade Reforged to pump up April as a surprise, but that's not really the use of Eel Umbra having flash. It's fine, but yeah. The other use for it is Umbra Armor means if the enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead we remove all damage from it and destroy the aura. So Eel Umbra sort of puts a bubble around April. If she takes damage, no big deal. But if she takes enough damage to kill her, or if she would be destroyed in another way, like a murder spell or a burn spell, something like that, then instead of her dying, we take all of the damage off of her and Eel Umbra pops and it goes to the graveyard. So this is a protective spell as well. So we can use this at flash speed to protect April if someone's using a removal spell on her without us, when she doesn't have Eel Umbra on. And you may be thinking, well, why didn't we just flash in the Umbra, or why didn't we just cast it beforehand if we've got the mana to cast it now? Well, because we might be anticipating an opponent using the removal spell. If we cast Eel Umbra, they might respond to it with that removal spell before it's resolved, and then they get us. Or it might be the case that we want to hold up 2 mana and cast this on an opponent's turn because we also have interactive spells, like a counter spell in hand, that we don't know if we want to cast that instead of Eel Umbra. And if it ends up we don't have to cast the counter spell, well then, during the end step of our opponent to the right, we just cast Eel Umbra, pump up our commander, make her a little bit more protected, and we're ready for our turn. Next up, we have Imperial Plate. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 and gives our commander, or the equipped creature, +1/+1 for each card in our hand. Even if that's just +3/+3 or +4/+4, that still makes our commander into a 5/5 or a 6/6 and means we're drawing 5 or 6 cards when she does damage. But imagine what happens when our commander does a bunch of damage with first strike damage, since she has double strike through another equipment, and then does it again. It fills up our hand with that first strike damage and does more damage for the regular damage after first strike has happened. So we get to do a lot more damage to her. And then what if we have something like a Thought Vessel that makes us not have a hand limit? Well, we end up drawing a boatload of cards, casting some of them, going to our next turn and swinging for a bigger boatload of damage. Imperial Plate, we have a couple of effects similar to this. This is a pretty sweet one in terms of its mana efficiency. Ilvoy Lightjammer is next. This is another equipment. It costs 1 and a blue, equips for 3, but it has flash, and when it enters, we attach it to a creature we control, and that creature gets hexproof until end of turn. So that means we can use this at flash speed to protect our commander, much like we were going to with Eel Umbra, but rather than our commander, popping the Eel Umbra due to her being the fact that she might have been destroyed or damaged, Ilvoy Lightjammer gives her hexproof, making her an illegal target for something that's targeting her, so that spell would fizzle, and we get to keep the Lightjammer on her since it auto-attached. We don't have to even worry about the equip cost. And then it just gives +1/+2. We see this effect a lot, but it can really build our commander up, and that toughness bonus is really, really nice. It keeps her protected more and more if we happen to be swinging in when we don't have unblockable. Mask of Avacyn is next. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 3 and gives, again, +1/+2 rather, and hexproof. So this is a little bit of an expensive piece here, but one more source of hexproof can't go wrong for us. Giving our opponent or our commander protection really helps. It is slow for 5 total mana to get it on there, and doesn't give her that much in the way of pump, but that protection is very strong. Next up, one I really love is Ring of Evos Isle. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1, and says at the beginning of our upkeep, we put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature if it's blue. April's blue. So this does not do anything for us the turn we get it attached to her. We just have to wait till our next turn for it to start pumping her up. Except, it has an activated ability. We can pay 2 generic mana and give her hexproof until end of turn while this is equipped to her. So the idea is we pay 2 to play it and 1 to attach it to her, and we hold up 2 mana, if we can, to protect her until the beginning of our next turn, at which point she gets a counter. And now, if we want, we can just take 2 of our islands, put them to the side, and that is our Ring of Evos Isle mana. We can activate that whenever we need to give her hexproof. Obviously, we might want to do that multiple times if, one opponent tries to remove April on one turn, and then another opponent does on the next turn, but you can't win them all, and this gives us a great way to have activatable hexproof whenever we need it. Security Bypass from Streets of New Capenna is next. 1 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, and it says as long as an enchanted creature is attacking alone, it can't be blocked. So we can't use this or it's not giving us unblockable if April's attacking with any other friends, which is fine because we don't mind April attacking on her own. We're building her up as big as we can anyway. So Security Bypass helps us with that. And it gives her, whenever she deals combat damage to a player, she connives. To connive means to draw a card and then discard a card. And if the card you discarded was not a land, the creature gets a +1/+1 counter. So the way this looks is we get to do our damage with April, and she'll have 2 on damage triggers. One will be the connive trigger, and one will be the one that's printed on her. Usually, I do her trigger first. I let it resolve first, so that we can draw more cards and then discard 1. And then Security Bypass will let us draw 1 card and discard 1. The reason for that is because if we draw more cards first, then we have more options for discarding both of the times we have to discard. And we want to discard something that's not a land, so we can get that counter on her and keep her getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, very nice. Sword Coast Sailor is next. This is a legendary enchantment background for 1 and a blue. Backgrounds just give our commander a new ability. So April would have the ability, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, this creature can't be blocked this turn. So this is 2 mana for an enchantment that just sits on the battlefield. We don't lose it if someone removes April, the way we would lose Security Bypass or Ether Tunnel, any of our auras. And as long as we're attacking the opponent that has the most life or is tied for the most life among our opponents, April's unblockable. Pretty sweet. It is worth noting, if we have the highest life at the table, that doesn't matter. As long as no opponent has more life than any other opponent, we get to have our creature be unblockable, our commander. Next is Sword of the Animist. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2. It is legendary, and it gives the equipped creature +1/+1, and when that creature attacks, not does damage, just on attack, we get to Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So we find ourselves an island, it comes into play tapped, but we've got it for next turn. Great. 2 and 2 to give our commander a pump, and to give us a chance to cast more and more spells. Sure, we love Sword of the Animist. One of the most expensive cards in the deck, in fact, at $5.90. Next is Thrawn Power Suit. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 and gives the equipped creature +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to it. And it gives it Ward 2. So a little bit of protection for our commander, and much like the card we saw a moment ago, our Imperial Plate, or rather, Adaptive Omni Tool is really the closest to it. This gives +1/+1 for each artifact we control. The Power Suit gives us +1/+1 for each equipment attached to April, but also each aura attached to her. So a little bit of a different calculation, but a similar premise to that, to Blackblade Reforged, counting lands, to Imperial Plate, counting the cards in our hand. This is one of our great pump spells, and a little bit of protection on top of it. Champion's Helm is next, and I'm using the Fallout Decks printing because it looks great. For 3 generic mana, we get an equipment that equips for only 1, so easy to re-equip if we have to. And it gives the equipped creature +2/+2, and as long as that creature is legendary, it has hexproof. One more source of hexproof for us. This is awesome because it's only 1 more mana to cast than Swiftfoot Boots, and it gives hexproof to our commander just like Swiftfoot Boots, and it equips for the same amount. And rather than giving haste, it gives +2/+2. So strong for us in lots of ways. Fire Shrieker is next, a classic. 3 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 and gives the equipped creature double strike. That's all it does, but double strike is enough. Sometimes double strike is evasion, because an opponent sees it and it's like, well, that's like first strike. So even if my blocking creature is big enough to survive their first strike damage, I'm going to end up trading with their small creature during regular damage. So I'd rather just not block, just take the damage, which is exactly what we want them to do, because we want to win with commander damage. It's usually what we're going to do with April. So double strike is a great way to have a little bit of pseudo evasion in addition to just doing a bunch of damage. But more importantly, most importantly even, we're hitting twice. So we're triggering April and anything else that we have that triggers on combat damage, like security bypass, twice as well. So if April has just Fire Shrieker on her and we do combat damage to a player, she's going to draw us 2 and we'll discard 1. Then we'll do combat damage again, first strike and then double strike, which means we again draw 2 and discard 1. Pretty great. Next is the Hand of Vecna. I was so excited when I saw this card. You never get to see Adventures in the Forgotten Realms cards in the wild that much, other than like Feign Death and Old Gnawbone, and I guess there's a few. Anyway, for 3 generic mana, we get a legendary equipment that equips for 2, or we can equip it by paying 1 life for each card in our hand. Sometimes that's worth it. Even if we've got like 7 or 8 cards in hand, paying 7 or 8 life could be the difference between getting this equipped to our commander or not if we're out of mana. It says at the beginning of combat on our turn, equipped creature or a creature we control named Vecna, which is not in the stack, so the equipped creature, gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in our hand. This is Imperial Plate again, but instead of giving a constant bonus, it only happens during our turn and only happens starting at the beginning of combat on that turn. However, it's another Imperial armor. So Imperial Plate, am I losing my mind? Imperial Plate, there you go. Yeah, this is that again, so that's pretty great. And the fact that we can pay life to equip it rather than mana is pretty sweet. Nettlecyst is next. This is a living weapon. 3 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2 and has living weapon. Living weapon means when it enters, we make a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ creature token and attach the Nettlecyst to it. I know you're thinking, but shouldn't a 0/0 die right away? Well, it would, except the equipped creature, which the Germ will be at the end of the resolution of the living weapon ability, gets +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment we control, which means at the very least it's getting +1/+1 since Nettlecyst is an artifact. So this is one more way, like some of the things we've seen before, like Thran Power Armor, to give us a lot of power and toughness boost to our commander. Now, when we move Nettlecyst off of that token to put it on our commander, the token will die, but that's all it was there for. It was just there to be a sort of temporary creature for us, a little friend that will hold the Nettlecyst for us until we can get it put onto our commander. So yeah. Next, from the Spider-Man set, Rocket-Powered Goblin Glider. 3 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 2. When it enters, if it was cast from our graveyard, we attach it to target creature we control. An equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has flying and haste. So, what's this about? Well, it has Mayhem for 2 generic mana. Mayhem, to be the simplest possible explanation, means if we discard this card, for the rest of the turn, at normal timing rules, we can cast it from the graveyard for its Mayhem cost. It's got to be cast from the graveyard, and it's got to be cast from the graveyard the same turn it was discarded, but we can cast it for that cost. So what's nice is, we can either cast this for 3 and equip it for 2, or we can just discard it to our commander's ability post-combat, or post-combat damage. We draw our cards, we discard 1 card, we discard the glider, it goes to the graveyard, and then post-combat, we can just pay 2 to cast this with its Mayhem cost. It will enter, and because it was cast from the graveyard, it auto-equips itself, and now our commander has +2/+0, flying, and haste isn't relevant, but +2/+0 and flying on an equipment that we only spent 2 mana on total to cast and equip. Pretty good. Brass Knuckles is next, also from Streets of New Capenna. 4 generic mana for an equipment that only costs 1 to equip. But when we cast the spell, we copy of it. Meaning, we cast this, we get a token copy of the spell, which resolves or we get a copy of the spell rather, and resolves as a token. So we get 2 Brass Knuckles on the battlefield. 1 printed and 1 token. Kind of like Bloodforged Battle Axe, but we don't have to hit with the equipped creature to make the token Brass Knuckles, the way we do with the Battle Axe. And the Brass Knuckles says, equipped creature has double strike as long as 2 or more equipment are attached to it. So the easy way to do this, if you've got nothing else, is just to equip both Brass Knuckles, the original one and the copy, since we're going to have both. That's a total of 6 mana, but that's okay. We're spending 3 and 3 sometimes on other equipment. This gives us double strike. But it's much better if we're able to just pay 4 for this, and then either copy we want, the token or the original, we just pay 1 and equip it to our commander with any other one of our equipment equipped to her. And now she's got double strike in addition to whatever that equipment's giving her. As you can see, like I mentioned before with Unblockable, we have we have several sources of double strike, and they can be, obviously we don't get triple strike or anything if we have multiple ones attached. So this is a great moment to talk about how you select the card you want to keep, or the cards you want to keep, when you draw cards with April. You're having to discard 1 anyway for her trigger. You also, if we don't have one of our pieces that lets us have no hand limit, have to discard the hand size. Oftentimes we're ending up with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 cards in our hand when we go to our end step, or when we go to the end of our turn. So if we already have a source of double strike in play, probably fine if we throw away Brass Knuckles. Just like if we already have a source of Unblockable on April, we may not need to keep Ether Tunnel. So the ability to have this sort of redundancy in our deck gives us a chance to either say, no, I think I do need this in play because my opponent might remove the other version I already have, or to throw it away. But it gives us a chance to be kind of cognizant of what we're doing and say, no, I think my opponent is pretty close to dead, and if they remove my one source of double strike, I'm probably going to be okay. Or, no, I think I really need to keep this Brass Knuckles and play it next turn just in case, because I don't know if they're going to cast a Vandal Blast or, a Cleansing Nova, something that would get rid of all of my my artifacts and equipment. My artifacts and my enchantments, that is. So, yeah. Yeah, just gotta be careful when you're choosing which cards you're discarding with April and at the end of turn because we've drawn so many cards. Turns out not to usually be that bad. Oftentimes, I have found in my testing, you can just discard all but 1 land in your hand because the amount of cards you're going to draw mean you're probably going to draw at least 1 more land. So the 1 you kept is your land drop for next turn, and then you draw a bunch more cards, and you'll probably have at least 1 land among those that you can keep until the turn after that. But sometimes you don't have enough lands to discard only lands, or sometimes you want to discard other things besides lands, like Security Bypass might want you to discard a non-land because of Connive. So if you've already got, Fire Shrieker attached to April, you don't necessarily need the brass knuckles. Just a way to think about it. Leyline Axe is next. This is 4 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 3 from Foundations and gives +1/+1, double strike, and trample. This is the only instance of trample in this deck, and it's pretty great. Making April into a 3/3 double striking trampler is much more dangerous than making her into just like a 4/4. So yeah, very nice with Leyline Axe helping us out here. But also expensive. 4 to play, 3 to cast, or 4 to cast rather, 3 to equip. You know, fine for us to throw away when we're discarding with April's Trigger or our instep if we've already got a source of double strike. However, Leyline Axe, we can cheat into play, quote unquote, if it's in our opening hand, because like any Leyline, if it's in our opening hand, we can begin the game with it on the battlefield. That's before anyone takes their first turn, their first action of their first turn. Leyline Axe is just gives us a little reward if it happens to be in our opening hand. That is awesome. So yeah. Finally, in our Voltron section, we have Octopus Umbra. It's another Umbra armor card, so it works the same way as the Eel Umbra, except this is 3 in double blue, so quite expensive. But it gives the equipped creature a base power and toughness of 8/8, and whenever this creature attacks, you may tap target creature with power 8 or less. So not only does it make April into an 8/8, it doesn't make her a 10/10, it changes her power and toughness. But it also gives us a little bit of evasion. I like to think of tapping creatures down as evasion if they don't stay tapped for at least a turn, rather than removal. So if an opponent has just one creature and it has power less than 8, well then April with an Umbra or an Octopus Umbra on her is unblockable because we just attack, tap that creature down, and we're set to draw 8 cards and discard 1. Very good. That is our Voltron section. I want to go over all the cards we have in our Pump section here. This is a number of the cards that we've already seen, but it's a few other things that we haven't, because pumping April up is such an important part of our game plan, as I described earlier. So Atomic Microsizer doesn't really pump her up unless we don't target her with it, because that +1/+0 gives her a power of 2, since the triggered ability gives her a base power and toughness of 1/1. So it doesn't actually change her power unless we're choosing to target something else with this, which we could. Maybe we have unblockable on April from something like Ether Tunnel, and we're attacking with a second creature that we want to be unblockable. So it's unblockable and power and toughness is 1/1. So yeah, technically pumps, worth noting. Bloodforged Battle Axe gives +2/+0 to the equipped creature. Mantle of Tide, +1/+2. Shore Up, we haven't seen yet. This is a single blue for an instant that gives target creature +1/+1 and hexproof until end of turn, and we untap. So this is one of our protective spells. Temporary hexproof and a temporary little power and toughness bonus is nice if we're using April to either sneak in a tiny little bit more damage. Again, sometimes it's the difference between beating someone with commander damage or not, or to just protect her and we get that extra damage, as a nice additional bonus. It's also the case that April can get quite big, but we don't have that many creatures in our deck, so an opponent might try and do an Alpha Strike on us because our big commander's tapped down. Well, we use Shore Up to untap her, in addition to giving her a bonus and hexproof. So then we can just eat their big attacker by blocking. Shore Up is great. Thinking Cap is another one of our equipment that gives +1/+2. Wizard Class is a class enchantment. This is a single blue mana for an enchantment that has 3 levels to it. The way this works, if you haven't seen these before, is it comes in and it just starts off with its level 1 ability. At sorcery speed, we can pay 2 and a blue to level it up to level 2. And then once it is level 2, we can pay 4 and a blue to level it up to level 3. And every time it gains a level, it gains that ability. It does not replace the original ones. So once we level it up to level 3, it has all these abilities. So when it first comes in, it's just a spell book. For a single blue mana, we have no maximum hand size. That's okay. Usually it's overrated to have no maximum hand size because people don't like to discard. In this deck, you're going to end up discarding. That's fine. It's part of what April does, and it's a natural consequence of drawing as many cards as we're going to. But not having to is pretty good too. So yeah, especially since we have a few things that care about that. Level 2, when we level it up to level 2, we just draw 2 cards. So this comes out for 1, gives us no maximum hand size, and any time where we may need to draw more cards, because maybe April's not unblockable yet, so she's not able to safely swing in. Or maybe we've gotten a bad row of luck, and April's drawn us a bunch of cards, and they're all basic islands. We need a little bit something more. If we need a mana sink, Wizard class is here for 3 mana to give us a divination. And that's the joke here. The Wizard class, they're becoming a diviner because this is divination. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, if we are able to get to the point when we have 5 mana left open and we don't want to use it on spells, which might happen, we can level it up to level 3, and Wizard class says whenever we draw a card, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This can be a sneaky bit of extra damage if we have double strike. Maybe April does 4 damage with double strike, we'll say. And so her first strike damage, she does 4. Wizard class will trigger 4 times, we'll put 4 counters on her, and now her regular damage is 8. Yeah, pretty good. We've seen the Adaptive Omni tool, gives the equipped creature +1/+1 for each artifact we control. Ether Tunnel gives +1/+0 and unblockable. The Planisphere puts a counter on the equipped creature whenever we cast a non-creature spell and when we draw our 3rd card each turn. Blackblade Reforged, +1/+1 for each land we control. Eel Umbra just +1/+1 to the enchanted creature. Imperial Plate, +1/+1 for each card in our hand. Ilvoy Lightjammer and Mask of Avacyn are both +1/+2. The Ring of Evos Isle can put a counter on the equipped creature if it's blue at the start of our upkeep, and the Sword of the Animist gives +1/+1 flatly. I think we've seen all of the rest of these. Yes, all but one. Thran Power Suit, +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached. Champion's Helm, +2/+2. Hand of Vecna, a power and toughness bonus based on the number of cards in our hand at the start of combat on our turn. Heraldic Banner is one of our manaliths. It is a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. We call that a manalith. It also says, as it enters, it's of the chosen color, but it's basically the same in this deck. As it enters, we choose a color. We will, of course, choose blue, and creatures we control of that chosen color get +1/+0. So we have a mana source that's giving a constant Anthem effect to pump up our commander, and the rest of our team that's blue. Pretty good. And of course, Nettle Cyst, +1/+1 to the equipped creature for each artifact and or enchantment we control. Rocket Powered Goblin Guider gives +2 to the power. Leyline Axe, +1/+1, as well as Double Strike and Trample. And Umbra Armor just changes the base power and toughness to 8/8. So that is our pump section. We have an evasion section as well, which seems small, and that's okay. We're going to see more of our smaller sections as we go as well. So, evasion comes in mostly the form of unblockable, like we've seen with Atomic Microsizer. K9 Mark 1 also gives us that from the Doctor Who decks. A single blue for a 1/1 legendary artifact creature robot dog, probably a good boy, with Doctor's Companion, which is an ability that does not matter in this deck, but 2 other abilities. Negative. As long as K9 is untapped, other legendary creatures we control have Ward 1. So our commander has a little bit of protection. Since she's legendary, she'll have Ward 1. She doesn't even have to be untapped, just K9 has to be. Or affirmative. If we pay 1 and a blue and tap K9, which means it turns this ability off, target legendary creature can't be blocked this turn. So if we really need unblockable and we just don't have a way to give evasion to our commander in the form of auras or equipment, or just something like Sword Coast Sailor, K9 we can activate and make her unblockable when we need to. Ether Tunnel makes her unblockable and gives +1/+0. Security Bypass makes the enchanted creature unblockable if it's attacking alone. Sword Coast Sailor makes our commander unblockable when it attacks one of our opponents that doesn't have less life than any other opponent. Waterbender Ascension is kind of fun in this deck. 1 and a blue. I originally put this in and then took it out and then put it back because I think it just works great for us, especially in a game that goes a little longer. This is an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, it's a creature. So if we deal combat damage with 3 creatures, that's 3 triggers for this. Then we put a quest counter on this enchantment. Quest counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by this card. And then, part of the same resolution, if Waterbender Ascension has 4 or more quest counters on it, we draw a card. So this is a way for us to draw cards in addition to our commander's on damage trigger. We can also waterbend for 4 generic mana to make a creature unblockable this turn. Waterbend means we pay 4 generic mana to activate it, but instead of paying mana, or in addition to paying mana, we can pay by tapping creatures or by tapping artifacts. And each creature and or artifact we tap pays for one of those generic mana. So what's great about waterbending in this deck is we have a bunch of equipment. And most of our equipment, or maybe all of our equipment, doesn't have ways to tap itself. It doesn't have like a tap ability to it. Which means if our commander has Atomic Microsizer attached to her, we can tap it as part of paying the waterbending, the waterbend cost on Waterbender Ascension. It doesn't matter if it's tapped, it's still attached to our commander, and it's still giving all of its benefits, so tapping it is just pure upside for us. If we have enough creatures and or artifacts, especially if we just have, 4 equipment attached to our commander, or just on the battlefield, those blood soaked battle axe tokens just sitting around, we can tap them, and them being tapped or untapped doesn't change their functionality at all. It just gives us a way to make a creature unblockable for essentially free. Pretty great. Detective of the Month is next. I love this card, and it's great in this deck. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human detective that looks like they're having a great day. It has Ascend. Ascend means, once this is in play, if at any point while it's in play, we have 10 or more permanents total. That means lands, Detective of the Month itself, any other permanents we have, including tokens. If at any point we have both Detective of the Month in play and 10 or more permanents, we suddenly get the City's Blessing, and we will have it for the rest of the game, whether or not we keep the Detective of the Month in play, whether or not we go below 10 or more permanents. As soon as we get it, we get to keep the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. The only card in the deck that cares about the City's Blessing is Detective of the Month. It says as long as we have the City's Blessing, detectives you control can't be blocked. Meaning itself, meaning our commander, and meaning all these tokens that it can make, because whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. So Detective of the Month pumps out tokens every time our commander is going to do damage, because she's rarely going to do, 0 damage. Meaning if we just draw one card from her, assuming it's damage to an opponent, that is, that'll be our second card for the turn, so we'll get a detective token. That token, our commander, and the Detective of the Month are all unblockable as long as we have the City's Blessing. By the time we get out the Detective of the Month, usually we'll have the City's Blessing right away, or maybe the next turn. So yeah, a great way to give not just our commander, but several of our tokens unblockable. Kaito Cunning Infiltrator is a Planeswalker. For 1 and double blue, we get a 3 loyalty Kaito Planeswalker with a static ability. Whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we put a loyalty counter on Kaito. So as opposed to our commander drawing us as many cards as the amount of damage she does, we only get 1 counter on Kaito. But still, that's a free counter. Sounds good. We can +1 Kaito to give up to one target creature we control unblockable until end of turn, and we also draw a card and then discard a card. So this leaves us neutral in terms of the number of cards we have in hand. But in our deck, we have so much good stuff and so many ways to cycle through our hand, since we're having to discard with our commander anyway. Throwing something in the graveyard is not that big of a deal. This is selection, and it's great selection. So it's virtual card advantage. But more importantly, we could just +1 Kaito and make our commander unblockable. And then once she does combat damage, Kaito will get another loyalty counter. So in a way, this is like a +2. We can -2 Kaito to make a 2/1 blue ninja creature token. Pretty good. Or if we can get Kaito up to 9 loyalty, which if our opponents are just letting us attack unblockably thanks to Kaito over and over, that's crazy. I don't know why they're not stopping us. But if we do this over the course of several turns, because remember, this is like a +2 on top of this 3, since it's going to give us this counter and then 1 more from our commander doing that unblockable combat damage. If we get up to 9 loyalty and we can ultimate Kaito, then we get an emblem that says whenever a player casts a spell, any player, any spell, doesn't matter what kind, doesn't matter who, doesn't matter when. At that point, we make a 2/1 blue ninja creature token. So we can absolutely fill up our board with ninjas, assuming we're able to ultimate Kaito. By the time we can do this, we've probably got another source of evasion, so it's fine to lose Kaito to this if we have to. Pretty nice. Next up, we've seen the rocket-powered Goblin Glider. It gives flying for evasion. Leyline Axe gives trample for evasion. Whirler Rogue is next. This is 2 and double blue for a 2/2 human rogue artificer who also looks like they're having a great time. When it enters, we make 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. So this is a 2/2 for 4, but it comes with 2 1/1 flyers. Those are artifacts, and they're little friends. This is great because it says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. So the idea behind this card is it comes in, you tap the 2 Thopters, and now one of your creatures is unblockable. Because this does not require the Whirler Rogue itself to tap, we can do this the same turn the Whirler Rogue enters the battlefield. Because Summoning Sickness only prevents the Rogue from attacking on the turn it comes in, and from activating abilities that have the tap symbol in it. This does not have the tap symbol in it, it just requires us to tap 2 other untapped artifacts. So we can tap these Thopters. But what we want to do with this is the same thing we were doing with Waterbender Ascension, and just tap down our rocket-powered Goblin Glider and our Leyline Axe, for example. Just 2 of our equipment that don't care if they're tapped or untapped, they work the same way either way. Whirler Rogue lets us do that, and now we can make many creatures of ours unblockable, since we've got plenty of artifacts to tap down to do so. Also, I should mention the way Whirler Rogue works in a tricky way. We have to control the artifacts that we're tapping down. But the creature that we target that becomes unblockable doesn't have to be our creature. It doesn't say target creature you control. So if we say to an opponent, hey look, opponent A, I know you want to attack opponent B, but they have good blocks. I will use my Whirler Rogue to make your creature unblockable, and then you can swing in. As long as you give me a kickback for that somehow. Maybe I want you to ignore me for a turn cycle, or maybe you have something that lets people draw cards, give me a chance to draw a card. Whatever it may be, if the opponent takes the deal, that's great. We get a little something out of the deal, and we get one of our opponents hurting one of our other opponents in a way that helps us over the course of the game. It is important, however, to make the deal in the right way, because if our opponent A says, okay, that sounds good, go ahead and activate your Whirler Rogue so I can attack with my unblockable creature. We say, no, because if we activate this now before combat, you could then choose to attack us with that creature, and it's still unblockable. We don't want to be hit. You need to go to combat and declare that as an attacker against opponent B first, and then before they get a chance to declare blocks, we will activate the Whirler Rogue and make your creature unblockable. And that opponent will either say, that's fair, we're making a deal, so we got to trust each other, so I will go ahead and declare this attack since that's why we're making the deal in the first place. And then we will activate our Whirler Rogue and everything will be fine. Or they will say, then I don't think I want to make the deal, which tells us that it wasn't being made in good faith anyway. So all of that is the way we use Whirler Rogue politically. But there's another way to use it as well, which is, let's say opponent B is attacking opponent C. We don't need to make a deal with opponent B to make one of their creatures unblockable. We don't need their permission for that. We can just notice that opponent C might take a horrible hit or even die if they can't block. So we make them unable to block by making opponent B's creatures unblockable. Whichever one or ones we need to make unblockable. We just sneak that in there before opponent C has a chance to block. And that just ends the game, or ends the game for opponent C, or puts them in a position for us to swoop in and kill them next turn, something like that. So yeah, Whirler Rogue giving creatures unblockable mostly works great for us, can also work great politically, or just as a sneaky way for us to get someone else to do more damage than they were thinking, and thereby disadvantage the defending player. Finally, Octopus Umbra, of course, taps down a creature with power 8 or less when this enchanted creature attacks, which, like I mentioned, can be like Evasion, if that creature would have otherwise been able to block. So those are the biggest parts of our game plan. Oh hey, did you just like the video? Nice. I'm just kidding, you don't have to like the video if you don't want to. Thanks for watching to this point either way. In any case, let's keep going, and let's start talking about the ways that we can support our game plan in terms of these vegetables I talked about a moment ago, or a while ago. In any case, we're starting with our draw section. This is a card advantage, but I just tag it as draw as a shorthand. It doesn't necessarily mean that all these cards draw us a card. It's also only sort of the minimum of 10. You know, I try to do about 10 for each of these. Don't have to stick to it very hard, but I did stick to it for this deck, even though our big source of card advantage in this deck is our commander. So these are all just here to supplement that. So Wizard class, second level, draws us 2 cards. Adaptive Omni tool, when the equipped creature attacks, we get to look at the top 6, and if we see an artifact among them, we can put that into our hand. That's not drawing a card, but it is like it, so it's card advantage. Into the Royal is next. This is a removal spell more so than a draw spell, but we can draw with it. For 1 and a blue, we get an instant that returns a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. And if this spell was kicked, we draw a card. And it has kicker for 1 and a blue, meaning when we cast it, we can either pay 1 and a blue, or we can pay the kicker cost and pay a total of 2 and double blue. So 2 mana to bounce a non-land permanent, or 4 mana to bounce a non-land permanent and draw a card. I like to Into the Royal or Blink of an Eye with the card draw mode as well, but you don't always have to. What's great about this as well is this could also be a protective spell, because it does not say target non-land permanent an opponent controls. If we want, we can hit April with this and bounce her back to our hand. That does mean that any auras that she had on her are going to fall off and go to the graveyard, but it also means that if we didn't do that, she would go to the command zone, assuming she was being like targeted with a destroy spell, and then we've got to recast her for more mana, which might slow us down more than we want to. On the surface, it looks like, well, we can recast her from the command zone for 5, or we can pay 2 here and then 3 again from the command zone to recast her, and it's the same amount. But you have to pay that 5 from the command zone all in the same turn. Into the Roiling her, if we're doing it on an opponent's turn, means we only have to pay 3 on our next turn, since we spent this on that opponent's turn. Also, we might want to do this because we've got the extra mana sitting around right now. Maybe we've got 4 mana, and we could do that to protect April and draw a card off of it as well. You never know. So yeah, this can be protective for our commander, or it can just clear the way for us, or get something that's real problematic that's in play, out of play, at least for a turn, and force our opponent to have to recast it. Mind Stone is another spell that's not really for drawing cards, but it can. This is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 colorless mana. So this is a mana rock for us, and a good one. But if it's late in the game and we just don't need the mana anymore, or we're just desperate for card draw, we can cash this in by paying 1, tapping and sacking it, and it lets us draw a card. Mostly though, this is in the deck to accelerate us, which we'll see more of soon. Security Bypass lets us connive. Again, it's not exactly card advantage because it is having us draw and discard. So we're down to the same number of cards that we had before, but it's important to remember that means we have selection, and that's virtual card advantage, especially combined with our commander who's giving us real card advantage. So since we're security bypassing and getting that trigger with our commander usually, so not quite the same, but pretty close. Waterbender Ascension, as we know, once our creatures are doing combat damage to a player and triggering its first ability, if it is the 4th counter being put on Waterbender Ascension, or any subsequent counter, we're also drawing cards. Archmage's Charm is next. This is several different things. Triple blue for an instant that says either counter target spell, target player draws 2 cards, or gain control of target non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. This is really cool. It's real mean if you steal someone's Soul Ring, or even just their Wayfarer's Bauble, or their Llanowar Elf, something like that. But usually, we're using this to draw cards if we need it, and in this deck, mostly we're using it to protect ourselves by countering spells, or to remove something dangerous by countering it before it hits the battlefield. Forensic Gadgeteer, is next. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 Vidalcan Artificer Detective. This is a detective, so with Detective of the Week, unblockable. It says whenever we cast an artifact spell, we investigate, meaning we make a clue token, which is an artifact that if we pay 2 and sack it, we draw a card. So a good way to get cards if we need them, just every time we cast an artifact spell, we've got a chance to pay 2 and get another card in our hand. Except that with the Gadgeteer in play, we don't have to pay that 2, because they make activated abilities of artifacts we control cost 1 generic less to activate. Now they can't reduce this to less than 1 mana, but it does mean that these clues, we can crack them and draw a card for just 1 mana each. Every time we cast an artifact spell, it comes with, essentially, the ability for us to pay a mana and draw a card. And we don't even have to do it right then. We could hold that clue and use it later. Or we can use those clues to tap for waterbending costs, or to improvise things in that way. The last thing that's worth noting is this discounts equip costs. Equip is an ability on equipment, which are artifacts. It's an activated ability, and it costs mana, usually. So, all of our equipment that don't inherently equip for a single generic mana, we're going to cost 1 generic mana less to cast, sometimes, or to equip rather, to activate, sometimes just lowering them to 1, which is pretty great. Next we have Psi Master Thopterist. This is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary human artificer that says whenever we cast an artifact spell, we create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Great! We get an extra artifact in play every time we cast an artifact spell, just the same way Forensic Gadgeteer does, but instead of clues, we're getting 1/1 flying Thopters. Thopters are great. And if we pay 1 and a blue and sacrifice 2 artifacts, they don't have to be these Thopters, but they sure can be, we draw a card. Lots of artifacts to sacrifice. Sometimes we've just got extraneous equipment in play. Maybe some Bloodforged Battle Axe copies. Yeah. Last in this section is the Mightstone and Weakstone. For 5 generic mana, we have a legendary artifact Power Stone. We'll talk about what that means in a second. It says when it enters the battlefield, we choose to either draw 2 cards or give a target creature -5/-5 until end of turn. So this is either an expensive way to draw cards or an expensive way to hopefully kill a creature. Either one's pretty good. Remember, removal in this deck is also evasion because it clears the path for our commander to get in. And the Mightstone and Weakstone, after it enters, can tap for 2 colorless mana, and this mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. That means it is Power Stone mana. What this means is, there's 3 things you want to think of that you can use this mana for. One of them is casting any spell that is an artifact. It can't be spent on non-artifact spells, but it can be spent on artifact spells. So any artifact, even if that artifact has colored mana requirements, we can use the Mightstone and Weakstone's mana to pay for its generic mana requirements or costs. So for example, we have Adaptive Omni Tool. It's an artifact. It costs 2. We can use the Mightstone and Weakstone's mana to cast it. We can also use the Mightstone and Weakstone's mana to pay for costs. So if someone has a creature with ward, and the Mightstone and Weakstone comes in, and we want to target that creature to get -5/-5 until end of turn. If their ward ability triggers, and it's a ward cost of 2 mana, we can use the Mightstone and Weakstone right away to pay the mana for that cost. That is not us casting a spell, so it's not restricted for that. The other way we can use this is also not a spell, which is to say activate abilities. For example, Mindstone, if we pay 1, tap and sack it, we draw a card. That 1 is an activated ability, so we can use the Mightstone and Weakstone's mana to activate it. The same is true for Forensic Gadgeteer's clues. We can sacrifice them using the Mightstone and Weakstone's mana. We can activate Psi's ability, 1 and a blue, and sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card with the Mightstone and Weakstone's mana paying for that generic mana. Obviously, we can't use its colorless mana to pay for this blue, but we can sure put it toward that 1. Or we could pay this waterbend cost here by tapping the Mightstone and Weakstone for that Power Stone mana, and that's 2 of our waterbend, 2 of the 4 that we need to activate this waterbend ability right there. So yeah, very good in this deck that has so many artifacts and lots of other options to use it with as well. Now the Mightstone and Weakstone, as I'm sure you're noticing, melds with Urza Lord Protector, but he's not in our deck, so don't worry about the fact that we can flip it over. That will not be relevant to this deck. Just all the base stats on the front are what matters. So that is our card advantage section. Goodness. Let's talk about acceleration now, which, as I mentioned before, I just shorthanded with this ramp tag. We're going to start with Lady Octopus Inspired Inventor from the Spider-Man set. A single blue for an O2 legendary human scientist villain. It's a nice tea. Is it tea? Is it coffee? I think it's tea. Anyway, when we draw our first or second card each turn, we put an Ingenuity counter on Lady Octopus. Like I mentioned before with a different one, Ingenuity counters don't do anything inherently, they're just used by this card. So if Lady Octopus comes in and we draw a card, that will be our second card that turn probably, because she won't be able to come in before our first card we draw on the turn. But it's not like this triggers twice every turn. It only triggers if the card we draw is the first card we've drawn that turn. So if she's already in play when we draw our card during our draw step, or the next card we draw after that. So yeah, she'll be able to get at least, generally she'll get one counter per turn. Oftentimes in this deck, she'll get both of the counters she needs every turn, other than the turn she comes in, thanks to our commander. And then we can tap her, and we can cast an artifact spell from our hand with mana value less than or equal to the number of Ingenuity counters on her without paying its mana cost. So this lets us get the Mightstone and Weakstone, for example, into play without having to spend any mana on it, if Lady Octopus has at least 5 Ingenuity counters on her, because it costs 5 mana. We can do this at instant speed. It doesn't give us permission to cast the spell. I think, am I right? Huh. Am I crazy? Yeah, it's cast as her last ability resolves. We can't wait and cast it later. So that means it's not giving us permission to cast it during that turn. It means we tap it, and as part of this ability, a part of that ability resolving, we are casting that spell. So we can do it at instant speed. We can surprise our opponent. Maybe we get the Mightstone or Weakstone into play on an opponent's turn and remove their creature with its -5/-5 ability. Maybe we sneak a mana rock into play, either on our turn or on someone else's turn, without having to pay for it. Lots of great ways we can use Lady Octopus in a deck that's got so many artifacts. And once she has 5 or more counters on her, we're basically set. Since we don't have cards that cost more than that, we just can use her to essentially, for free, cast an artifact every turn. Pretty great. Especially when we are sometimes fighting for mana, since we have so many good options of cards in our hand. She can just say, all right, what's our biggest or most relevant artifact in hand before we have to go to clean up? Go ahead and cast that. Next we have Soul Ring, our best source of ramp. A single mana, a generic mana, for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. Very strong. Even in a deck with low costs and low curve like our deck, we want this. Wayfarer's Bauble is next. This is 1 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2 tap and sack it, we Rampant Growth. We search our library for basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Great. Gets us a extra land into play, an extra island. It gives us an access to this that we can really only get in a couple of other ways. And in this deck, I think it's just the Sword of the Animist that lets us Rampant Growth, even though it lets us do it multiple times. But if we get to turn 1 Wayfarer's Bauble, turn 2 Crack It, turn 3 now we've got 4 mana, so we're going to be able to play our commander and maybe Lady Octopus. Pretty good. Arcane Signet, of course we're running this as well. This is a 2 mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, which is to say blue. So this is a 2 mana untapped mana rock for us that makes the color we need. That's great. Cold Steel Heart is next. This is 2 generic mana for a snow artifact. That its snow is not relevant in this deck, but it is nice. It enters tapped, and as it does, we choose a color. We will choose blue, and it taps for 1 mana of the chosen color. So this is a 2 mana tapped rock, which is not as good as Arcane Signet, but we need more acceleration at lower mana costs. So here it is, a tapped source of blue for us. I wish we had another one of those. Oh wait, we do. It's Sky Diamond. I'm just going to mention it now. It's exactly the same thing, but we don't have the option to choose a different color. 2 mana, comes in tapped, taps for blue. Great. 3 different rocks that make mana for us that only cost 2. Wait, 4 because we have Mind Stone. Wait, 5 because of Felwar Stone. You can see how this goes. Lots of different ways for us to accelerate using these artifacts. 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So this may not be able to make blue for us, which is fine. It means it can be used for any of our generic mana costs. You know, if we have an opponent, our opponents are, all their decks are just black and green and red, let's say, then we can tap this for any one of those colors and use it to cast something that only requires generic mana, like our Sky Diamond, which will then give us blue later on. It's also the case that if an opponent has a card like Chromatic Lantern, or a land that just on its own taps for 1 mana of any color, or they have a Dryad of the Elysian Grove, something that gives their lands the ability to tap for any color, it does not matter that they won't tap those lands for blue. Those lands could produce blue. So at that point, we can tap Fellwar Stone for blue, even if they wouldn't. Even if none of their lands are going to be getting tapped for blue for their own purposes. So yeah. Imrakul's Messenger is next. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Eldrazi Fairy Rogue with Devoid. Devoid's probably not going to come up in a game, but you never know. Someone might try to Pyroblast this card and thereby counter it or destroy it because it's blue. Because it's not blue. Pyroblast can do that to a blue card, and this would be blue if not for this ability, which functions in all zones. So Imrakul's Messenger is not actually blue. Usually not going to come up, but just so you know, that's how that works. Otherwise, it is a 2/1 flyer that says whenever we draw our second spell each turn, we make a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this token to add a colorless mana. Notice that does not have a tap symbol in it, which means whenever we make one of these Eldrazi spawn, we can sacrifice it that same turn, or even right away, to make that colorless mana. This is why this is in our acceleration section, because every turn that we're attacking with our commander and doing damage, we're drawing our second card that turn, so we're getting a little bit more mana available to us. In addition to having these tokens that we can block with, we can even equip them if we wanted to. Yeah. Mostly it's here for mana acceleration, but you know. Next is the Poo-Poo UFO. I don't know what this is. I'm not a Final Fantasy person. Let me know in the comments why this is here and why it does what it does. But it's a pretty good card in this deck, actually. For 2 generic mana, we get a 0/4 flying artifact creature construct alien, that if we tap it, we can put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield. And we can pay 3, and until end of turn, its base power becomes equal to the number of towns we control. We don't have any towns in this deck, because we do not care about this effect right here. We care about this effect. This is a Walking Atlas, but it's an 0/4 flyer, so it's a good blocker for us. And it gives us the ability to, when we draw a bunch of cards, before we have to discard down, if we've got extra lands in our hand, tap this, we get to put 1 into play. It doesn't even say tapped. So we get to get this into play and actually accelerate our mana. We can even do this early on. Maybe this is what we play for turn 2. Turn 3, we play our commander, and we've got an extra land in hand. Go ahead and activate this right away, and now we've got 4 mana going into turn 4, before we even have to make our land drop for turn 4. This seems pretty good. We talked about the Sky Diamond. Sword of the Animist, of course, rampant growths us whenever the equipped creature attacks. Thought Vessel is our last 2 mana rock. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for colorless, and it means we have no maximum hand size. So this is a nice effect for us. We have a few cards, like I mentioned before, that pump up our commander, or the equipped creature really, based on our hand size, so we might as well have a couple of ways to make it so we don't have to discard down. Even if all we had was Thought Vessel, that's still pretty good. But we do have a couple of other ones, and there's even more in the considering section. We've already seen Heraldic Banner. Comes in, we choose blue, and it taps for blue, in addition to giving all of our blue creatures +1/+0. And the Might Stone and the Weak Stone taps for 2 Power Stone mana, which is great acceleration for our artifact-heavy deck. That is our acceleration section. We have a interaction section, which is, again, I've just tagged as removal as a shorthand. We start with Rapid Hybridization. This is a single blue for an instant that destroys a creature, and that creature can't be regenerated, and that creature's controller makes a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token. Some kind of big scary thing. So this is here because it's very efficient removal. It takes something that is dangerous to us, or could be a problem for us, or is just someone's commander, and slows that player down by, at instant speed, destroying their commander or their creature, whatever we need to get rid of. And they just get a 3/3 in exchange. This is not the kind of effect I like to run typically in my decks, but for this deck, we need something that's inexpensive and efficient, so here we go. Cyber Conversion is next. This is a really fun one. For 2 blue mana, we have an instant that turns a target creature face down, and it is a 2/2 Cyberman artifact creature. Cool. A face down creature doesn't have any of its printed qualities from the front side, which means this is essentially like exiling a creature and replacing it with a 2/2 artifact creature. It's just that creature does not go to the graveyard or to exile, which means that if we hit an opponent's commander with this, they just have to flip their commander over, and now their commander is just a 2/2 Cyberman and has no other effects. It's like we've enchanted it, but we didn't have to enchant it, it's just face down. So they can't even remove the enchantment, since there isn't one. They're going to have to either sacrifice that creature, bounce it, attack with it, and hope someone blocks in order to get it back. And if it's one of our opponents, probably, if they attack us, we're just going to take the 2 damage. We'd rather take 2 damage than have them get back their powerful creature or commander. If they attack one of our other opponents, those opponents will probably do the same thing. So yeah, Cyber Conversion, just turning something into a 2/2 artifact creature, and thereby causing it to lose all of its abilities, pretty great. Next we have Disruption Protocol. I run very few counterspells in the decks that I make for this channel, simply because the kind of pods that play these sorts of decks, counterspells don't always feel great. So I don't run them that often, but sometimes. And sometimes they're a great match for the deck, including this one. So this is 2 blue mana for an instant that says counter target spell, and as an additional cost, tap an untapped artifact you control, or pay a generic mana. So this is not counterspell, AFCS, actual factual counterspell, although you could run that, and that would be fine. Disruption Protocol has a little bit more flavor to it, and people tend to think less of cancel than they do of counterspell. And this is just cancel. Double blue and a 1 to counter a spell, but instead of the 1, we can tap one of our artifacts, just like we've seen before with waterbending. We can tap one of our equipment, and it doesn't matter that it's equipped, it works the same way that way. So Disruption Protocol as a way to protect ourselves, protect our commander, and stop an opponent from casting something that could be a threat for us. Yeah, good way for us to do it. That's all true of Archmage's Charm as well, as we've already seen. In Too Deep is another fun one. This is double blue for an aura with Split Second. It says, as long as the spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. Meaning, players can just still do a couple of things, but essentially this means until In Too Deep resolves, nothing else is getting added to the stack. And it says, enchant creature, planeswalker, or clue. An enchanted permanent is a colorless clue artifact with pay 2 and sack it to draw a card. So this is a weird removal spell. It hits a creature, or it hits a planeswalker, or I guess you can enchant a clue with it, but really it says enchant clue because it makes that permanent into a clue, and it wants to, not fall off. So giving this to someone and saying, hey, get a clue, is pretty nice. It also goes with the flavor of our reporter commander, and it lets us, rather than, turning an opponent's commander into a Cyberman, we turn their commander into a clue, and they have the ability to crack that clue and draw a card right away, and then put their commander back in the command zone. That means they've had to spend 4 mana to recast it in addition to its casting cost, which is to say its casting cost plus the 2 from the commander tax, plus the 2 to crack the clue, but they did get a card out of that. So flavor win, and they can't stop us from doing it generally because of Split Second. We've seen Into the Royal. We can use it to bounce a non-land permanent and maybe kick it to draw a card as well. Reality Shift is here to do something kind of similar to Cyber Conversion. 1 and a blue for an instant that exiles a creature, and then its controller manifests the top of their library, meaning they take the top card of their library, put it on the battlefield face down, and it is a 2/2 creature. And if that card happens to be a creature card, which they get to look at and find out, then they can pay its casting cost to turn it face up at any time. So yeah, it may be that they just get a land, which means we exile their creature and they get a 2/2. Similar to the effect of Cyber Conversion, but not quite the same. So yeah, just another sort of unconditional instant speed creature removal. Pretty good. Resculpt is next. Another unconditional removal, but for an artifact or creature. 1 and a blue for an instant, exile target artifact or creature, and its controller makes a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Originally from Strixhaven, great. It's similar to Rapid Hybridization, but it costs 1 more and gives them a bigger thing, but it can also hit artifacts. Pretty good. We've seen the Archmage's Charm. Next, we've also seen Mice and a Weak Stone, gives -5/-5 to a creature when it comes in if we choose for a 2. The final spell in this section is Imprisoned in the Moon, a pet card of mine. 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker and makes that permanent into a colorless land that taps for colorless mana and loses all card types and abilities other than that. So similar to what we were talking about with In Too Deep. In Too Deep makes that creature or planeswalker into a clue. Imprisoned in the Moon makes it into a land. Which means that our opponents either got to have interaction with this aura, or probably it's stuck as a land because most people don't have a way to sacrifice their own lands. Sometimes they do, but they can't sacrifice it to an effect that sacrifices creatures because it's not a creature anymore. Now it's a land. This does ramp them a little bit. It turns their commander or whatever we've hit into a land that makes mana. But yeah, this is a great way to shut down a commander that might get in the way of us doing our thing. And remember, as I've said a couple times already, every piece of interaction in this deck is also a form of evasion, because it means we have 1 fewer things that could block our commander if she's not already unblockable somehow. That is our interaction section. We only have 1 Wrath in this deck. It is Aetherize, and it's not even really a Wrath, it's really more of a protective spell, because we are trying to be as aggressive as we can. Aetherize is 3 and a blue for an instant that returns all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. Now, we can use this defensively if an opponent tries to somehow kill our commander in a way that we didn't anticipate when we're attacking with her. We can use Aetherize to bounce her to our hand. But what we're trying to do with this is recognize that we don't have as many creatures as most of the decks that we might build, and we don't have a guarantee of having a lot of tokens to supplement that. So it may be the case that by attacking with our commander every turn, if we don't have Shore Up to untap her and block with her, we might be taking a bunch of damage. So Aetherize buys us some time, maybe even more than a turn. If our opponent is attacking us and it looks like it's going to be a bad attack for us, even a killer attack for us, we just cast Aetherize and we get to bounce every creature that's attacking. Notably, Aetherize does not say return all creatures target player controls to their hand. It's just all attacking creatures. This does not target, which means if an opponent has hexproof, or any of their creatures have hexproof or shroud or anything, Aetherize doesn't care. It bounces them. So a great way to protect ourselves and buy ourselves at least 1 turn, hopefully, to be able to try and kill off that opponent with our commander that only gets bigger and only draws us more cards. So yeah. It is painful, especially in this deck, to have to try and hold up 4 mana for this, but we know what situation we're going to need this in, so we know when to make that choice. And honestly, April just makes our board bigger every time because we get more cards in hand and therefore more mana sources and more ability to cast more spells. So yeah, Aetherize will be a nice setup for us when we need it. And those are our support sections. We have a couple more sections that supplement our game plan. We're going to go over them now. We start with this Payoffs section. These are cards that reward us for doing the things we were going to do anyway. For example, Lady Octopus gives us she gets a counter on her every time we draw our first or second card each turn. Now, we were going to draw 1 card per turn anyway, because it's Magic. But in our deck, we're going to be drawing a second card most turns, so getting extra counters on her from that is pretty great. Mantle of Tides, when we draw our second card each turn, we get to automatically equip it, hopefully to our commander. Wizard class, if we get it up to level 3, lets us put a 1/1 counter on one of our creatures every time we draw a card, including the first one for our turn. So this lets us pump up our commander or anything else we want to. Astrologian's Planisphere, also rewards us for drawing cards, because it puts a counter on the equipped creature when we draw our third card each turn, as well as putting that counter on the creature when we cast a non-creature spell. And again, we're running a total of 11 creature spells in this deck, including our commander. Emrakul's Messenger, it also cares about us drawing our second card each turn. It makes us one of these 0/1 Eldrazi spawn, which we can use as acceleration or as blockers or whatever else we want. Mischievous Mystic, similarly, is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flyer, the same as Emrakul's Messenger. And when we draw our second card each turn, we make a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. So we're not able to use those for mana the way we are with those Eldrazi spawn, but they do fly, and that's pretty great for us. Where's this guy going? Detective of the Month pays us off when we draw our second card each turn by making us a 2/2 detective. Forensic Gadgeteer pays us off by making us a clue token whenever we cast an artifact spell. Rocket-powered Goblin Glider, the payoff for this is the fact that we can cast it and auto-equip it for a total of 2 with Mayhem, since Mayhem comes from us discarding it, which that's something we're also going to be doing anyway, thanks to our commander. Psymaster Thopterist, of course, much like our Forensic Gadgeteer, triggering when we cast artifacts, Psy is going to give us a Thopter whenever we cast an artifact. So too will Thopter Fabricator when we draw our second card each turn. This is 2 and a blue for a 4/4 vehicle with crew 2 that flies, and it makes us a 1/1 Thopter whenever we draw our second card each turn. Pretty great. We can use those Thopters, the many Thopters we have, to crew it, and we've suddenly got a 4/4 flyer. That seems pretty fun. Finally, we have Psychosis Crawler, because we're drawing an enormous number of cards in this deck, and we would be remiss not to include this gross thing. So this is a 5 generic mana artifact creature Phyrexian Horror with power and toughness, each equal to the number of cards in our hand. So it is possible, if we empty our hand, for this to die. Probably that's not going to happen in this deck. Probably it's going to be pretty huge. And it says whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So if our commander attacks and is a 7 power creature, and we do that 7 damage to our opponent, we're going to draw 7 cards and discard 1, and then get 7 triggers from the Psychosis Crawler, draining our opponents for 7 each, on top of the damage that our commander did. This will also trigger on the free draw we get at the start of each turn. So this is a little bit of removal bait. Our commander really empowers the Crawler, but it's annoying enough to our opponents with this drain effect that they might decide to use a removal spell on it rather than our commander, which is a mistake, I think, on their part. Although it may not be. You got to assess the board at the time. But yeah, a Psychosis Crawler really helps us out. That is our payoff section. We have a protection section. This is ways to keep our commander safe. So Canine Mark 1, as long as it's untapped, our commander has Ward 1. That makes it simpler, or makes it harder for our opponents to target our commander with something deleterious. Shore Up can give our commander hexproof until end of turn. Disruption Protocol protects us or it or any of our stuff by maybe countering a spell that could be bad for us. Eel Umbra gives Umbra armor to our commander, protects her from being destroyed. Ilvoy Lightjammer can give hexproof until end of turn. Mask of Avacyn gives hexproof as long as it's equipped. Ring of Evos Isle, while it's equipped, we can activate it to give the equipped creature hexproof. Swiftfoot Boots, is another equipment. It's not in our Voltron section because it's not really trying to do as many Voltron-y things as we've seen so far, but I guess we could have put it there. It's 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. Haste may not be relevant for our commander, but you never know. Maybe we get this out on the turn before our commander comes out, and maybe we've been able to accelerate ourselves a little bit so that we play our commander, we have 1 more mana left over, equip this, and swing in with our commander and just draw some more cards. Seems good. Thrawn Power Suit gives the equipped creature Ward 2. Archmage's Charm, just like Disruption Protocol, is a counterspell, so we can use that to protect us. We can also use it to protect ourselves or our commander by stealing one of their permanents, something that would be threatening to us. It can only be mana value 1 or less, but that's still pretty good. Champion's Helm gives the equipped creature hexproof if it's legendary, and Octopus Umbra, just like Eel Umbra, has Umbra armor. protecting them from being destroyed. That is our protection section. Let's take a look at our synergy section. Similar to our payoffs, these are cards that rather than giving us a reward when we do something we were going to do anyway, these connect to the things that we've accumulated over the course of doing all that stuff. So for example, Lady Octopus is both. She pays us off every time we draw our first or second card each turn by getting an ingenuity counter, and she synergizes with artifacts by letting us cast them for free as long as she has enough ingenuity counters to meet or beat the mana value of those artifacts. Adaptive Omni Tool, Thrawn Power Suit, and Nettle Cyst are all equipment that give a power and toughness bonus based on the number of artifacts and enchantments, or just artifacts, or ores and equipment that we have in play or attached to the equipped creature. Imperial Plate gives us a power and toughness bonus based on the number of cards we have in hand, as does Hand of Vecna, and Psychosis Crawler also cares about the number of cards we have in hand because that gives it its power and toughness. Disruption Protocol, Waterbender Ascension, and Whirler Rogue all give us ways to use our equipment, particularly equipment, but otherwise untapped artifacts that we have in play beyond just the uses that are printed on them, by tapping it to pay the extra 1 mana cost for Disruption Protocol, by tapping it to activate Waterbending on Waterbender Ascension, or by tapping 2 of them to make a creature unblockable. And last, of course, Forensic Gadgeteer makes all of our activated abilities of our artifacts cost 1 generic less to activate, with a minimum of 1, of course, which is a pretty great synergy in itself. So that's our synergy section. We finally, for our spells, have this section that makes tokens for us. Different ways that we can have little things that will help us either as supplemental attackers or blockers or something along those lines. So Astrologian's Planisphere comes with Job Select, so it comes with a 1/1 hero token. Emrakul's Messenger and Mischievous Mystic and Detective of the Month all make us a token when we draw our second card each turn. An 0/1 Eldrazi that we can sack to add a colorless mana, a 1/1 blue Flying Fairy, or a 2/2 blue and white Detective. Kaido can make these 2/1 ninjas if we -2 him, or if we get that emblem when we ultimate him. Nettle Cyst does come with a token. It's an 0/0 germ that will die as soon as we move the Nettle Cyst off of it, but it does mean that when we cast this Nettle Cyst, we are getting a creature to go with it, much the same way we do with the Astrologian's Planisphere, at least for a while. Sai makes us Thopters every time we cast an artifact spell. Thopter Fabricator makes us Thopters every time we draw our second card each turn. And Whirler Rogue comes in with 2 Thopters automatically. And those are all the spells we have in this deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with our basics. We have 30 islands. They're TMNT art, and they're basic islands. We have so much in this deck that requires blue mana, and so much that doesn't. So having basic lands, like we have plenty of utility lands, as you'll see in a moment, but having this many basics doesn't hurt us at all, and it's also our sort of go-to for what to discard to our commander's triggered ability. Because if, like I mentioned before, if we have the ability to draw a bunch of cards, and then we have to discard one with our commander's ability, and we have 2 islands in play, or in our hand rather, we just throw one away. Because we know that other one is going to be our land drop on the next turn, and we're likely to draw more cards then, including at least 1 island. So if we need to discard something, and it's not, our rocket-powered Goblin Glider that we want to be able to mayhem out, a basic island is usually pretty great for us. The only thing that's better than it is a different kind of basic land that we just don't need anymore. So let's talk, or of non-basic land rather. So here are our fixing lands. We're not running Command Tower, because Command Tower in this would be an untapped source that makes blue. That's what a basic island is. We are running Path of Ancestry though. Path of Ancestry is a tap land that makes 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So this is a tapped blue source. Not ideal for this deck, but we can use that. When we use that mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. We have 6 other creatures in this deck that are human, or that 6 other creatures in this deck that are human and or detective. So because we have the Forensic Gadgeteer, who is a detective, and then all of our other humans are either detectives as well, like the Detective of the Month, or just human. So yeah, there are 6 other cards in this deck beyond our commander that we can get a scry off of with this, which is pretty nice. And we've got our commander with it. So if this happens to be in our opening hand, we just play this for turn 1, and now it's sort of a better island the whole game. We're running Myriad Landscape, which is, again, a card that we likely will want to discard to our commander's ability, because we're just drawing so many cards that we won't need this ramp unless we can get it early. But if we can get it early, it's pretty great too. So it's a tap land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. So, of course, in this deck, 2 islands, then put them on the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. So this is acceleration. It's just very slow acceleration, because this comes in tapped, it requires us to pay for it, and then the basics it finds come in tapped as well. But if we can get this out turn 1, and then turn 4, let's say, maybe activate this, because turn 2 we can't activate it because we need 2 mana to put into it, and then turn 3 we don't want to because we want to cast our commander then. But if we've got the ability to have a little bit of extra acceleration with Myriad Landscape, sometimes we're able to get that out and it really helps us. Or we can just pitch it, no big deal. Temple of the False God, on the other hand, is oftentimes very good for us. Obviously, if our opening hand has no land in it other than a single island and a Temple of the False God, and then we don't have any acceleration in it either, we probably want to mulligan that. It's best if we can keep at least 1 piece of acceleration in our opening hand and at least 2 or 3 lands. But Temple of the False God, with the ability for us to get our lands out so reliably in this deck, it comes down and we can use it to accelerate ourselves as well, and it's great when it does. I know not everyone likes this land, but it taps for 2 colorless, and it doesn't come in tapped. So it's like a soul ring. It's a soul land. We just can't activate it at all unless we have at least 4 other lands in play, so 5 or more lands including itself. So again, not going to help us before we've got those other lands in play, but if we have that poo-poo UFO, if we have acceleration from something like our Wayfarer's Bauble, Temple of the False God might be coming in and being able to be activated prior to turn 5, and even if it's just turn 5, it will really help us out. Those are our fixing lands, and our last section is these 5 utility lands. So we're running Archway of Innovation. This is from Modern Horizons 3. This is a land that enters tapped unless we control an island. Probably this is an untapped land if that's the case. It taps for blue, just like an island, or we can pay a blue and tap it, and the next spell we cast this turn has Improvise. Improvise is essentially what waterbending is, except waterbending can also tap creatures. So we can tap our artifacts to pay generic mana costs for the next spell we cast. Which means if we have enough equipment in play, we can play an equipment that doesn't have a blue pip in its cost, by just tapping our other artifacts. Or we can do that with our, we might tap a Bloodforged Battle Axe to play our Soul Ring. That seems crazy since it's costing us 1 and tapping the Archway to do so, but Improvise can really help us for things that are larger spells. Like maybe we want to Etherize something, Etherize for 1 less, essentially, would be pretty good. Since Etherize requires us to pay a blue, we'd pay a blue into this, and we're tapping this, so that's already 3 sources tapped down. But then we're tapping down 3 artifacts to improvise it, which means we've only spent 3 mana and tapped down some artifacts, and we got our Etherize out of it. So that's a nice sneaky way for us to do things too, to protect ourselves. Anyway, Archway of Innovation can be really useful to us, and even if not, it's likely to be an untapped blue source. As I often say in my videos, the pods that the decks I build are intended for don't typically smile on land destruction. And that's fair. You want to be able to play your deck and do the thing you want to do without someone stopping you by limiting your mana resource. However, there are enough non-basic lands running around that sometimes they really help someone's game plan or hinder our own, at which point it's fair to interact with them. If someone's running a Rogue's Passage and they're running a Voltron deck like us, then making your commander unblockable is going to be really powerful for them. So we would like to stop them from doing that. Likewise, if they're running something like a Glacial Chasm and they're making it so we can't do damage to them, then not only are we not advancing our game plan by doing commander damage to them, we're not able to draw cards. So we want to be able to interact with that thing that's either stopping us from doing our deal or empowering their deal too much. Demolition Field is my one answer for that, because no one's going to have a problem with you having one way of interacting with this type of permanent. So this is a land that comes in untapped. and it taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. And then that land's controller gets to search their library for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither player is down a land, assuming they have basics left, and man, are we going to have basics left. We've got 30 of them. But both players have lost a non-basic land, and we've gotten rid of the thing that was a problem for us and probably the rest of the table. And interacting with things is how Magic goes, even if it's a land, especially since we're replacing it. So, totally fair. I mentioned Rogue's Passage. Just don't let anyone Demolition Field this. No, I'm teasing. So, Rogue's Passage is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay for and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. Everything I said about the Whirler Rogue is just as true here. We want to be able to use this mostly for our commander, but it's pretty expensive to do so. 4 and tap, but if we really need it, and this is our only option, then there we go. Maybe they've gotten rid of our Atomic Microsizer and our Ether Tunnel, something like that. But of course, we can also use this politically, make a little deal and make someone else's thing unblockable, or we can use it strategically and make someone else's thing unblockable without their controller having a say in it, so we can kill whoever else they're trying to attack. Secluded Starforge is next. This is a mana sink in a deck that doesn't need that many mana sinks, but we've got it. It's an untapped land, taps for colorless, so the cost of inclusion is very low. We can pay 2 and tap it, and tap X untapped artifacts we control, and target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, but only as a sorcery. Which means prior to combat, if our commander has 3 or 4 artifacts on her, we can just pay 2 and tap the Starforge, and tap those artifacts, and now she's got +3 or 4/+0 until end of turn, which is even more cards we're drawing when she does her damage. Very good for us if we don't have better use for 3 mana. Or if we really are just hurting for something, maybe a board wipe happened or something and we need to rebuild, we can pay 5 and tap the Starforge to make a 2/2 robot artifact creature token as a nice little extra token for our deck. Finally, we're running Terrain Generator, which is the Edge of Eternity Stellar Sights printing. I just think it's beautiful, so that's what we're doing. This is a land that comes in untapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it to put a basic land card from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. Only basic lands, and tapped, so not quite as good as our UFO, but it is another way for us to get our lands out of our hand if we need to, which often is the case, or rather is sometimes the case. Terrain Generator is usually a mana source for us in this deck, but having the option, with such a low cost of inclusion, to use it if, who knows, maybe our commander swings in, does 5 damage, and we draw 5 basic lands. Well, this at least gets it out of our hand, gets one of them out of our hand, and we are able to use it for mana next turn, and that sets us up for the turn after that. And that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new TMNT Commander decks every Thursday through mid-April when Secrets of Strixhaven drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style. I really hope you enjoyed this April Reporter of the Weird deck, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when I make my videos go live. Consider becoming a member of the channel, something new I've started doing. Maybe you'll be able to see these videos when I upload them rather than when they're scheduled to come up. And the thing that helps me out most is if you remember that Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.